pursuit of justice is the cornerstone of any civilized society. Every year, thousands of eager minds enter law schools across the country, dedicating years of their lives to understanding the intricate mechanisms of the legal system. They study constitutional rights, the rules of evidence, and the fundamental principles that separate order from chaos. They are taught to protect the innocent, to uphold the law, and to ensure that truth prevails in the courtroom. It is a profound and tragic irony when a community dedicated to the administration of justice becomes the epicenter of a meticulous, premeditated crime. This is the story of an aspiring attorney who sought to use her education to help those in need, and another who believed his legal training could help him commit the perfect crime. It is a testament to the power of modern forensic science, the complexities of criminal psychology, and the relentless dedication of law enforcement personnel who ensure that no one, regardless of their education or intellect, is above the law. Nestled in the heart of Georgia, the city of Macon is known for its rich history, its southern architecture, and its vibrant academic community. At the center of this academic environment is Mercer University, a respected institution that draws students from across the nation. The Walter F. George School of Law at Mercer is a rigorous environment where students endure long hours of study, intense academic pressure, and the heavy burden of preparing for the bar exam. In the early summer of 2011, the campus was quiet. The regular academic year had ended, but a dedicated group of recent graduates remained in town, cloistered in their apartments and the library, studying for the upcoming state bar examinations. The atmosphere was one of quiet focus, high stress, and shared camaraderie among the students who were all working toward the same monumental goal. Among these aspiring attorneys was a young woman named Lauren Giddings. Raised in Maryland, Lauren was the kind of person who left a lasting impression on everyone she met. Her peers and professors described her as exceptionally bright, deeply compassionate, and fiercely dedicated to public service. Lauren did not enter law school with the ambition of securing a high-paying corporate position. Instead, she was driven by a genuine desire to become a public defender. She wanted to stand in the gap for those who lacked resources, to ensure that the marginalized received fair representation, and to make a tangible difference in the criminal justice system. Her athletic background, highlighted by her time playing softball at Agnes Scott College, instilled in her a sense of discipline and teamwork that translated perfectly to her legal studies. She was a beacon of positivity in the high-stress environment of law school, known for her infectious smile and her willingness to help her fellow students. Lauren resided at the Barristers Hall apartments, a complex located conveniently close to the law school. The complex was heavily populated by Mercer law students, creating a tight-knit, insulated community where neighbors knew each other and shared the common bond of their legal education. It was generally considered a safe, quiet place, ideal for the intense concentration required for bar preparation. However, the illusion of safety in this academic enclave was about to be shattered in the most profound way imaginable. The transition from student to professional is marked by the grueling preparation for the bar exam, a period where days blur together in an endless cycle of reading, outlining, and memorizing case law. During this intense period in late June 2011, Lauren maintained regular contact with her family and friends. She was responsible, communicative, and deeply connected to her support system. Therefore, when her text messages and phone calls suddenly ceased, the silence was immediately deafening. By the evening of Saturday, June 25th, Lauren had stopped responding to communications. By Sunday, her friends' initial assumption that she was simply immersed in her studies turned into a growing sense of unease. By Monday, that unease had blossomed into outright alarm. When a healthy, responsible adult with no history of erratic behavior suddenly ceases all communication, law enforcement agencies recognize the critical nature of the situation. The first 48 hours of a missing persons investigation are paramount. As time passes, digital footprints fade, witnesses' memories blur, and the likelihood of a positive outcome diminishes significantly. Lauren's friends, utilizing the very legal and procedural knowledge they had just spent 3 years studying, knew that they could not wait. They contacted the Macon Police Department to request a formal welfare check. Officers arrived at the Barristers Hall apartments to conduct the check. Upon entering Lauren's apartment, they were met with a scene that was deeply unsettling in its normalcy. There were no signs of a struggle, no overturned furniture, and no forced entry. Her wallet, her keys, and her identification were all present. Her study materials were laid out as if she had just stepped away for a moment and intended to return. For investigators, an undisturbed scene like this presents a complex puzzle. It suggests either that the individual left voluntarily under highly unusual circumstances, or that they were intercepted by someone they knew and trusted, someone who could enter the residence without raising an alarm or causing a disturbance. The Macon Police Department immediately escalated the situation from a routine welfare check to a full-scale missing persons investigation. Search parameters were established. Detectives began the meticulous process of constructing a victimology report, analyzing Lauren's daily routines, her financial transactions, her digital communications, and her social circles. In many criminal investigations, law enforcement officers must look closest at those who are closest to the victim. Statistically, strangers rarely commit such targeted acts without leaving a chaotic scene. Detectives began canvassing the apartment complex, interviewing neighbors, and requesting any available surveillance footage from the surrounding area. The community response was immediate and robust. Lauren's fellow law students, understanding the gravity of the situation, organized search parties, distributed flyers, and utilized social media to raise awareness. Among those who inserted themselves into the center of these search efforts was a fellow law student and neighbor, Stephen McDaniel. McDaniel lived in the apartment directly next to Lauren. To the casual observer, he appeared to be a concerned neighbor, a socially awkward but well-meaning peer who was simply trying to assist in a time of crisis. He spoke with the police, he spoke with the media, and he remained a constant presence in the courtyard of the apartment complex as the investigation unfolded. From a psychological and criminological perspective, the behavior of a perpetrator inserting themselves into an investigation is a well-documented phenomenon. Individuals who commit severe crimes often feel a psychological compulsion to remain close to the investigation. This behavior serves multiple purposes. First, it allows the perpetrator to monitor the progress of law enforcement, gathering intelligence on what the police know and what evidence they might be seeking. Second, it allows them to craft a public facade of innocence and concern, hoping to deflect suspicion by hiding in plain sight. Third, in some cases it provides a morbid sense of control or superiority, as the perpetrator watches the authorities struggle to solve a puzzle for which they hold the key. Stephen McDaniel fit the profile of a quiet, isolated student. He was known to be highly intelligent, but lacked the social grace and interpersonal skills that many of his peers possessed. He had a known interest in true crime, weapons, and the darker aspects of human psychology. While these interests alone are not indicative of criminal behavior, especially for a law student studying criminal defense or prosecution, they would later form a chilling context for the evidence that investigators would uncover. The turning point in the investigation of Lauren Giddings' disappearance did not happen in a forensic laboratory or a secluded interrogation room. It occurred in broad daylight in the courtyard of the apartment complex, broadcast live to the local community. A news crew from a local television station was on the scene, covering the ongoing search efforts. The reporter approached Stephen McDaniel for an interview. McDaniel, presenting himself as the concerned neighbor, agreed to speak on camera. During the interview, McDaniel spoke about Lauren. Statement analysis experts, who study the linguistic patterns of suspects, often look for subtle psychological tells in an individual's speech. One of the most common indicators of hidden knowledge in a missing persons case is the subconscious shift from present tense to past tense. When speaking about someone who is missing, hopeful friends and family typically use the present tense, saying things like, "She is a great person," or "I hope she comes back." During his interview, McDaniel consistently referred to Lauren in the past tense, stating things like, "She was just a really nice person." This linguistic slip suggests that the speaker subconsciously knows the victim is no longer alive. However, it was not just his choice of words that made this interview a seminal moment in true crime history. As the interview progressed, the reporter received breaking information from her colleagues. She turned to McDaniel and asked him a direct question regarding the fact that police had just located human remains on the property. The physiological reaction captured on camera is a textbook example of a psychological shock response. Upon hearing that remains had been discovered, McDaniel's entire demeanor fractured. The color physically drained from his face. His eyes widened in a display of primal panic. His body stiffened, and he visibly struggled to maintain his balance. He interrupted the reporter, his voice trembling, and repeatedly stated that he needed to sit down. He moved away from the camera, collapsing onto the pavement, clutching his head. To the untrained eye, this might look like the extreme grief of a neighbor realizing his friend is gone. But to trained investigators and behavioral analysts, this reaction told a different story. This was the catastrophic collapse of a carefully constructed reality. McDaniel had believed he had committed the perfect crime. He believed his methods of concealment were foolproof. The sudden realization that law enforcement had undone his work and that his capture was imminent triggered a massive surge of adrenaline and cortisol, resulting in a physical near collapse. He was experiencing the acute physiological manifestation of absolute terror. While the public reeled from the dramatic television broadcast, investigators were methodically securing the crime scene. The discovery had been made in the refuse area of the apartment complex. Maintaining the integrity of the scene was paramount. Officers established an inner perimeter to protect the immediate area of discovery and an outer perimeter to keep onlookers and the media at a safe distance. Crime scene technicians, dressed in protective suits to prevent contamination, began the meticulous process of documenting the area. Every angle was photographed, every potential piece of evidence was cataloged, and the remains were respectfully and securely transported to the medical examiner's office for formal identification and forensic analysis. The clinical findings confirmed the worst fears of the community. The remains belonged to Lauren Giddings, and the nature of the discovery indicated that the perpetrator had gone to extreme lengths to conceal the crime, systematically altering the remains in an attempt to prevent identification and complicate the forensic investigation. This level of post-incident concealment requires a significant amount of time, a specific set of tools, and a profound psychological detachment from the victim. Following his bizarre behavior on television and the discovery of the remains, law enforcement officially detained Stephen McDaniel for questioning. He was transported to the police station and placed in an interrogation room. The subsequent interrogation is studied by law enforcement professionals due to McDaniel's highly anomalous behavior. When an individual is placed in an interrogation room, their baseline behavior is established by investigators. Most people, whether innocent or guilty, exhibit signs of stress. They fidget, they ask questions, they express anger, fear, or confusion. Stephen McDaniel did none of these things. For hours he sat in a rigid, catatonic state. He stared blankly ahead, his posture perfectly straight, his movements restricted to the absolute minimum required to breathe. When detectives asked him questions, he either remained completely silent or offered monosyllabic answers in a flat, monotone voice. Psychologists and interrogation experts debate the root cause of this behavior. Some argue it was a manifestation of extreme psychological trauma, a dissociative state brought on by the horror of his own actions and the reality of his impending incarceration. Others, however, view it through the lens of his legal education. As a law student, McDaniel knew the power of the Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination. He knew that any statement he made, any emotion he showed, could and would be used against him. By rendering himself a virtual statue, he was attempting to give the police absolutely nothing to work with. He was trying to outsmart the interrogation process by refusing to participate in it entirely. The detectives utilized various techniques to break through this wall of silence. They used the read technique, starting with non-accusatory questions to establish a baseline, then moving into direct confrontation. They presented him with the growing mountain of circumstantial evidence. They attempted to appeal to his sense of morality, asking him to provide closure for Lauren's family. Through it all, McDaniel maintained his rigid, unnerving silence. However, modern criminal investigations do not rely solely on confessions. While McDaniel sat silently in the interrogation room, forensic analysts and crime scene investigators were dismantling his life, piece by piece, and building an irrefutable case against him. The legal threshold for obtaining a search warrant requires law enforcement to demonstrate probable cause to a judge, showing that there is a reasonable basis to believe that evidence of a crime will be found in a specific location. Based on his proximity to the victim, his suspicious behavior, and the timeline of events, investigators secured warrants to search McDaniel's apartment, his vehicle, and his digital devices. The physical search of his apartment yielded immediate and damning results. Investigators located the packaging for a specific type of cutting tool, the exact type of tool that forensic pathologists determined was used in the concealment of the victim. Even more chilling, they discovered a master key to the Barristers Hall apartment complex inside McDaniel's residence. This key granted him unfettered access to every single apartment in the building, including Lauren's. It explained the lack of forced entry at her crime scene and shattered the illusion of security for everyone living in the complex. But the most devastating evidence against Stephen McDaniel was not physical, it was digital. In the modern era, our digital footprints often tell a more accurate story of our lives than our physical actions. Computer forensics experts seized McDaniel's laptop and desktop computers, utilizing specialized software to image the hard drives. This process creates an exact bit-for-bit copy of the drive, ensuring that the original evidence is preserved and unaltered while analysts search the copy. McDaniel, relying on a flawed understanding of computer science, believed he had covered his tracks. He had deleted numerous files and cleared his internet browser history. However, deleting a file on a standard computer does not actually erase the data. It simply removes the directory pathway that tells the computer where to find the file, marking the space as available to be overwritten. Until new data is saved directly over that exact physical location on the hard drive, the original data remains intact in what is known as unallocated space. Forensic analysts easily recovered this deleted data, uncovering a horrifying digital timeline of premeditation and obsession. The internet search history was a clear window into his intentions. In the months and weeks leading up to the crime, McDaniel had conducted extensive searches on how to commit the perfect crime, how to defeat a polygraph test, and the specific methods used to dismantle and dispose of evidence. He had researched the specific tools required and the physiological processes of the human body after life ceases. Furthermore, investigators recovered thousands of images and videos. Among this digital hoard, they found highly disturbing footage taken by McDaniel himself. Using a camera attached to a long pole, he had filmed the inside of Lauren's apartment through her second-story window. He had documented her movements, her routines, and her private life without her knowledge. This electronic stalking provided the crucial element of mens rea, the guilty mind. It proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that this was not a crime of passion or a spontaneous act of violence, but a meticulously planned and coldly executed act of predatory behavior. The prosecution team, armed with this overwhelming array of forensic, digital, and circumstantial evidence, began preparing for trial. In the American legal system, the burden of proof rests entirely on the prosecution, who must prove the defendant's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Usually, defense attorneys look for gaps in the timeline, procedural errors by law enforcement, or alternative theories of the crime to introduce that necessary doubt. In the case of Stephen McDaniel, the defense faced an insurmountable wall of empirical data. The prosecution had the master key, linking him to the scene. They had the packaging for the specific tool used in the crime. They had the video evidence of his prolonged stalking. They had the digital search history proving premeditation. And they had the infamous television interview demonstrating his consciousness of guilt. Recognizing the overwhelming nature of the evidence and facing the very real possibility of capital punishment if convicted at trial, the defense strategy shifted from contesting the charges to mitigating the sentence. Negotiations between the defense and the prosecution resulted in a plea agreement. In exchange for the state taking the death penalty off the table, Stephen McDaniel agreed to plead guilty to the charges. A crucial component of this plea agreement was the requirement for an allocution. In the legal system, an allocution is a formal statement made to the court by the defendant, admitting to the specific facts of the crime. This serves two purposes. Legally, it establishes a factual basis for the judge to accept the guilty plea. Morally and emotionally, it forces the perpetrator to publicly take responsibility for their actions and provides the victim's family with the undeniable truth of what occurred, eliminating any lingering questions or false narratives. In a courtroom heavy with grief and tension, Stephen McDaniel, no longer the catatonic statue of the interrogation room, stood before the judge and detailed his actions. He admitted to using the master key to enter Lauren's apartment in the early morning hours. He admitted to the fatal encounter, and he admitted to the subsequent steps he took to conceal his crime. The clinical, detached manner in which he recounted the events stood in stark contrast to the profound emotional devastation he had caused. The sentencing phase of the hearing provided a platform for Lauren's family to address the court and the perpetrator. Victim impact statements are a vital part of the judicial process, ensuring that the focus of the proceedings remains on the human cost of the crime. Lauren's family spoke of her brilliance, her kindness, and the gaping hole left in their lives by her absence. They spoke of the countless individuals she would have helped as a public defender, a future stolen not just from her, but from the community she intended to serve. The judge, weighing the overwhelming evidence, the premeditated nature of the crime, and the profound impact on the victim's family, accepted the plea agreement. Stephen McDaniel was sentenced to life in prison. The legal resolution brought an end to the procedural nightmare, ensuring that the perpetrator would never again walk free, but it could not undo the tragedy that had unfolded. The story of Lauren Giddings is not merely a recounting of a tragic crime. It is a profound study of contrast. On one side there was Lauren, a bright, empathetic young woman who studied the law to protect the vulnerable and uphold the principles of justice. On the other side was a shadow, a peer who studied the exact same laws, but sought to exploit them, believing his intellect could shield him from consequence. The investigation stands as a masterclass in modern police procedure. It highlights the critical importance of immediate action in missing persons cases. It underscores the profound advancements in digital forensics, proving that in the modern era, our electronic devices hold the undeniable truth of our actions and intentions. It also serves as a fascinating, albeit dark, case study in criminal psychology, from the perpetrator's need to insert himself into the investigation, to the physiological collapse captured on live television, to the extreme withdrawal exhibited during interrogation. In the years following the resolution of the case, the community of Macon and the Mercer University School of Law have worked diligently to ensure that Lauren Giddings is remembered not for the manner in which her life ended, but for the brilliant light she brought to the world while she was here. Scholarships have been established in her name, designed to support students who share her passion for public defense and community service. Her legacy lives on in the attorneys who walk the halls she once walked, carrying forward her mission to provide justice for those who need it most. As we examine the meticulous forensic work, the psychological complexities, and the final legal outcome of this case, we are left to ponder the delicate balance of our society. The systems we build to educate and uphold justice are only as strong as the individuals who participate in them. When someone uses that very system to cause harm, it shakes the foundation of our security. It forces us to ask a difficult question about the nature of human behavior and the limits of our understanding. If someone who dedicates their life to studying the law can so callously disregard it, how do we truly measure the safety of our communities? And what vigilance is required to ensure that the pursuit of justice always outpaces the shadows of deception?